Yes. Yes. Okay, DW, I don't think Tyler Rain says that he cannot hear you.
Yeah, and I can hear myself, but yeah, I don't know. There was like a delay.
DW, I don't think Tyler Rain says that.
Okay.
Let's see here. How's that, guys? I think that's it. Tell me
Sound
that's it.
Can you hear me now?
Sound check.
Guys in the comments, please let us know if you can hear.
That's it.
Can you hear me now?
Sound check.
Guys in the comments, please let us know if you can hear. Other than the Josh Rosen comment, looks like we're still
Can you hear
muted.
me now? Oh, great.
Yeah, I think we're coming through.
Are we?
Excellent. All right, thank you, Tyler. Appreciate the assist there for this amateur taking over. As I was saying, obviously Kevin Knight has taken the night off. He will be back for the normal Falcoholic live show. As you can see, we are here to watch the history of the Atlanta Falcons, episode 1 from Secret Base. Gina has seen this. I have not seen this. Adnan, have you seen this yet?
I have not, no.
All right, so this is going to be a lot of fun. We're really looking forward to this. What we're going to do, if you guys want to watch along with us, I'm going to count down from 3. 3, 2, 1, click play. So 3, 2, 1, click. And I'm going to kick off the video here that we have on right there in our live stream. And you guys can watch at home with us. We will comment throughout. There will be drinking. Gina, are you prepared?
Yes, I'm prepared. Cheers.
Good Falcons fans are always prepared, especially at the Falcoholic. All right, so if you guys are ready, we're going to get this going. So what I'm going to give you guys a second to do is pull up the video. If you don't have it, look for the Secret Base. You'll find it by just searching through YouTube for Secret Base. Over 1 million.
Or type in history of the Atlanta Falcons. That's what I did.
Or type in history of the Atlanta Falcons, and it should be one of your first search
not too many people have bothered to make a documentary about this team.
That's true. And it's part of the reason I'm so excited about this one.
Yeah, not many people could take the alcohol tolerance to make it through an entire documentary about the Falcons.
Yeah, especially like what, a 4 to 6 parter, I guess this will be.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, so hopefully you guys have the video pulled up at this point. So let's do the countdown, and we will get this thing underway. Adnan, Gina, you guys ready as well?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so 3, 2, 1, play.
I have an ad for White Lotus.
Mine has begun.
Here we go. All of their graphics are just so like intricate and
the
cool.
score is 28-9. People like to talk about 28-3, but no, sorry, I'm gonna have to be a snob about this.
Yeah,
Many people won't taste the
finally got
difference,
synced
but
up.
if you want the best of the best, reach for the vintage and go for 28-9.
This
All
is
right,
where
I'm
we're
done with this
starting.
already. Yeah, I'm done with this already. I can't do it anymore. I'm out, guys.
It's the highest anyone's ever been, with a minute and a half left in the third quarter of Super Bowl 51. Largely because of what immediately precedes it. The New England Patriots have finally scored a touchdown. Down 25 points, they needed it quickly. What they produced instead was this arduous, lurching drive full of runs
This
and
is
short
just
passes that
depressing.
ran more than 6 of the remaining 23 minutes off the clock. Minutes they just do not have to spare. When Tom Brady finally drops one into James White from 5 yards out, well, sure, it's the very least they can do. So they set up for the extra
Why
point
are
and
we
trot
doing
out
this
Stephen
to the viewers?
Gostkowski, one of the most automatic kickers of all time.
It does
to
get
complete
better,
the
I
paperwork.
promise.
Yeah, NFL rules now set the distance for the extra point a few yards back from where it used to be, but paperwork is still all we see it as. When he clangs it off the right upright, it makes the sound you hear when you're attempting to close the program without saving your work. You can literally hear them losing. After all that, the Patriots still can't bring it to double digits. It just is not their night. On the next play, the Patriots further debase themselves by lining up for the onside kick, one of the most graceless and stupid-looking things in the world of sports. If the extra point is paperwork, the onside kick is, check fraud. Your job is to kick it to yourself, but the rules say you have to kick it at least 10 yards, so you have to make it bounce as awkwardly as possible before you pick it up.
What we're about to see is a level of desperation rarely seen in football. A team in such dire straits that they felt compelled to kick onside before the game has even reached the fourth quarter. It's something that, if you're lucky, carried about a 20% success rate back then. While the Pats don't initially telegraph their intentions with personnel, they do show a look that they typically don't on kickoffs, with 4 Patriots bunched tightly on either side of kicker Stephen Gostkowski. That should be an obvious sign of what's about to happen. Yet, the Falcons are lined up like it's a regular old kickoff. When the Pats stay in this look, even as Gostkowski approaches the ball, it removes any ambiguity. But somehow, the Falcons initially retreat even after Gostkowski strikes the ball. It's like the mere idea of an onside kick has never even crossed Atlanta's mind. And it just doesn't matter. Everything's been coming up Falcons, and everything's continuing to come up Falcons. They recover the kick, still stumbling into doing the one final thing they needed to do to extinguish the one remaining molecule of doubt. This is now a formality. All they have to do is dot some I's and cross some T's on the last page of paperwork to acquire their very own shiny new Vince Lombardi trophy.
I feel like this is what waterboarding feels like.
2 years, I just knew I had to be back home in Atlanta to watch the Falcons try to pull off the unthinkable. I had to be surrounded by my people to fully appreciate what I was watching. I mean, as a Falcons fan, this is a moment that rarely happens. The last time my team made the Super Bowl, I was a snot-nosed 6-year-old, barely comprehending the full importance of the big game. Fast forward almost 20 years later, there was no chance I would pass on the opportunity to watch the team that I grew up with go for it all in the city that I love. And what I was watching was pure domination. Not only were the Falcons crushing on all levels, but they were doing it against the goddamn Patriots. Seeing the smug look wiped off Tom Brady's face was pure bliss. For a moment, it seems as if my friends and I were the happiest we had been in our entire lives. There was talks of which one of the finest, let's just say clubs that Atlanta has to offer that we would go to celebrate at. This was a moment that a city and a franchise had been waiting on for years, and it was finally happening.
Now Atlanta takes over, already on the fringe of field goal range thanks to their onside kick recovery. If the Patriots want to even fantasize about winning this ballgame, okay, here's what it'll take. First, it will require holding the Falcons offense, a unit whose 540 points constituted one of the NFL's 10 greatest ever scoring seasons, without points for at least 3, possibly 4, consecutive possessions, barring future onside kick recoveries. Well,
I never felt comfortable in this
game.
game.
Terminated due to the end of a half. The 2016 Falcons had 160 drives. They scored on 92 of them, over 57%.
My friend that was with me that's an Eagles fan, he couldn't understand why I never felt comfortable. This is why I never felt comfortable.
At a minimum, 2 touchdowns, 2 two-point conversions, and a field goal of their own just to force overtime. The Atlanta Falcons have finally done it.
Comfortably in Patriots territory, the brilliant Matt Ryan immediately finds tight end Austin Hooper for a 9-yard gain. Maybe they'll end this drive with a touchdown, or maybe they'll settle for a field goal. And field goal might be more tasteful. Either way, it's time to stamp this envelope and ship it. This isn't just any Super Bowl, because this isn't just any point in history. What happens on this field tonight is inseparable from the political climate at this time. There are millions of people who, still reeling from a crushing material defeat, are clinging to these Atlanta Falcons for at least some purely symbolic victory, however small. These people have been big Falcons fans for precisely 2 weeks. Some are fans of other teams who have hopped on the bandwagon. Some couldn't even tell you the rules of American football. Millions more have been diehard Falcons loyalists for decades. Through every euphoric ride,
1980
collapse, weirdo head coach, electrifying athlete, and bewildering turn of events. This moment, though, is a first. Nearing the fourth quarter, the Falcons are up huge. It's a victory procession very few players or fans ever get to experience. After spending their entire 51-year existence, off in a distant world, completely isolated from real consequence, the Atlanta Falcons have spent the last 2 months destroying all comers and playing their way directly into the center of the universe. Few teams have ever played on a stage this large, and few teams have ever looked so invincible. This is an exhilarating, perfect moment. So let's just take a minute to enjoy it. Let's stay a little while.
No, let's not.
At USAA, we've been called to exclusive.
Oh,
I actually want to cry right now.
we're going to skip this ad. Hopefully you guys can get back in sync with us, but got to pay the bills.
I mean, you don't have YouTube Premium, DW? Come on.
I know, right? This was not well planned. I apologize.
Dave Shook's not famous enough for that. Oh, we really have blown some really big talents over the years. My God. Oh, this is 7 parts. Okay.
We're going to draw this out and torture you 6 more times.
I thought it was just 4, to be honest.
1834.
Something happens when you draw a line through North Georgia that runs exactly north-south. It doesn't even need to be more than a few hundred yards wide.
No, that's where we're beginning.
Interesting.
Up in Cherokee County, there's a town named Ball Ground, so named because the Cherokee people play games of Anetsa in this area. Anetsa is a Cherokee variant of stickball, and its meaning,
I'm such a
little
nerd
brother
with
of
this
war,
stuff. I love
is
this
appropriate. Was sometimes thought of as a stand-in for war, a substitute that would actually resolve disputes over things like property, or perhaps even land, without resorting to actual conflict. It was an elegant solution that seems eons ahead of its time. There's a report of one particular match held in 1834, making it perhaps one of the last great Anetsa games before the Cherokee were forced out of their homeland by the United States government. It sounds so much like the football that would follow a century and a half later. The object of the game was to send the ball through the goalposts. It was played by 18 on each side, typically on Saturday afternoons in the fall, on a field that stretched a little longer than 100 yards. Everyone turned out to watch. $1,000 bets were placed on the game. Before and during the match, cultural traditions dominated the proceedings. Supporters cast spells on their opponents, not unlike today's fans who spend all week talking trash at their rival. It's easy to look at sports today and think of them as a corporate invention, but they're no more of an invention than singing, dancing, acting, or any of the other things that make us human. These are things that have always been part of us, and always will. In the ensuing decades, the oppressors who stole all this land fought over it and ultimately destroyed it. Almost exactly due south of this spot, nearly 100 years later, we see another collection of athletes harnessing sports as an alternative to warfare. The Great War is destroying Europe, as humans have invented horrifying new ways to maim and kill each other. America is being dragged in, and the future of the entire world is uncertain. And all the while, one man is unbothered. John Heisman is in the lab. Georgia Tech's head coach has spent the war years building one of the first great American sports dynasties. Much more importantly, he spent
That's not the case anymore.
The sport of football into the game that we recognize today. He's perfecting the forward pass, a rule he spent years tirelessly advocating for. He's insisting on 4 quarters instead of 2 halves. He's telling his quarterbacks to yell hike before they take the snap. He's telling his centers to actually snap the ball to the quarterback instead of rolling it to him on the ground. It was as though there was no war in Europe, or any Europe at all. Instead, Heisman was obsessed with the beauty of football, a thing that's kind of like stabilized war in a controlled, non-lethal state. It gave every violent thing inside of people a place to go.
Look at Atlanta being the
In these
birthplace
2
of the
moments,
forward
sports
pass.
served as a sort of
I've never knew that.
alternative to conflict, mostly untouched
That's
by the
very
realities
cool.
of the time and place. And it's appropriate that along this thin little ray of time, we see it happen a 3rd time. half a century later. You know all about it. In the 1960s, the war in Vietnam is scaling up. Americans are perpetually worried that they're on the brink of nuclear annihilation. At home, art and culture are being turned upside down. Politics are beginning to fracture in a way that will later prove permanent. Women are fighting for equal rights. The South, and Atlanta in particular, is a focal point of the civil rights movement. And swooping directly into the middle of all of it, like a lost bird in a Kmart, are these Atlanta Falcons. This logo will eventually be redesigned into something sleeker and more aggressive, but for now it's perfect. The beady-eyed face, the dopey, somewhat mortified facial expression. It looks like it walked into the wrong restroom. Regardless, the city of Atlanta rallied around this big
I was
fella.
going to say that company.
And in a city as diverse as Atlanta, a lot
Oh.
of the fans don't have much in common but looking forward to Sundays. From the wealthy suburbs of North Atlanta to the forgotten streets of East Atlanta, people with vastly different upbringings and values, whether racially or economically, toss that to the side in the name of the Falcons. I may not personally know you and what you stand for, but for 4 quarters, if you're rocking black and red, we're family.
I love how the viewer count is
Falcons
shooting
fans
up
are like the
after
parents of a
Super Bowl.
disappointing child. The team may fall flat on their face over and over, but we'll always begrudgingly be there to show support and love. We can talk shit about our team because that's our child, but don't you dare speak ill of them if you're not part of the family, because one day we hope they'll finally
Don,
get it
that was
right.
a terrible
And
football
when they
stadium.
do, we'll be there.
It was only a matter of time. For decades, the AFL and the NFL had avoided the South, which was considered to be college football territory. Major pro football mostly kept in the Northeast and Midwest, with a couple of ventures into California. It wasn't until 1960 that they finally put teams in Texas. Take away the map, and it's not even clear that the South exists. But in terms of economy and population, the region was getting too big to ignore. When the Falcons moved in with their baseball counterparts, the Braves, both became the teams of the South. There just wasn't anyone else around. To this day, step into a hole-in-the-wall bar or diner
been
in
getting
Alabama or
disrespected
Tennessee or the Carolinas, and you still might see ancient Falcons and Braves stuff on the wall. It was all theirs. Land nobody else wanted. It was brought there by insurance exec and Atlanta native Rankin Smith after he put up $8.5 million, which at the time was the highest price ever paid for an American sports franchise. One of his first moves was such an ambitious one that 50 years later it sounds like a joke. He was going to hire the most famous coach on earth. Vince Lombardi's Green Bay Packers had won 2 NFL championships, and they were on their way to a third when Smith called him up to hire him away. He just went for it. Most amazingly, it almost worked. According to Smith, they'd shook hands on bringing Lombardi to the Falcons, and the media reported that it was just about a done deal. Of course, Lombardi reconsidered, stayed with the Packers, won the NFL championship that season, then won Super Bowl I, then won Super Bowl II. But before he did, Lombardi recommended his assistant coach for the job. Smith listened, figuring that if he couldn't have Vince Lombardi as the Falcons' first head coach, he'd get the next best thing.
Wow,
His name was Norb.
that's wild.
It is. Norb Hecker.
Alright, here's what we're looking at. See this guy here? This line? That's 500. The break-even point. That's where you are if you've won exactly as many games as you've lost.
That's such a
As the
Falcons
winningest
thing.
team in NFL history,
Norb
the
Hecker
Packers are
instead of Vince
somewhere
Lombardi.
way up there. Now, here's the first Falcons game in 1966. They are now officially below 500. Here they are finishing their first season with a 3-11 record. In the 54 seasons that have followed, they have never made it back to that line. You know what we always say around here. Who cares?
The Falcons followed up that inaugural 1966 campaign in which they lost 11 of 14 games by losing 12 of 14 games in each of the next 2 seasons. Now, you'd expect any new expansion squad to struggle for a while until they get their feet under them, but you wouldn't expect this. It just gets worse and worse the more you examine. So,
Of
let's
course
examine
it
more.
does.
Here you can see, relative to the rest of the league, exactly how bad their offense was at scoring points, and exactly how good their defense was at allowing points. This is how that manifested itself in each of their 42 games through those first 3 seasons. It's a thing of beauty. In nearly a third of them, they just chose to drink that Romeo and Juliet potion and play dead, with 11 different losses by at least 30 points. The biggest win the Falcons of this era had was simply in getting their first ever draft pick to sign on the dotted line of the contract. When they selected University of Texas All-American linebacker Tommy Nobis first overall in the
Nobis.
1966 NFL Draft,
All-timer.
competing just to secure his rights with the AFL's Houston Oilers, who'd also drafted
First
him
good
10
move of
minutes
the
later
franchise.
in
Yeah.
their league's draft. Nobis was an incredible player who both teams desperately wanted. The Oilers put the full court press on, utilizing an astronaut to recruit him while in outer space. Oh
my God.
Adams used his deep oil pockets to make a more appealing offer. He even said if Nobis chose Houston, he'd take him on his plane and let him sign his contract above his collegiate stadium. Ultimately, Nobis chose Atlanta in the more highly regarded NFL, and he went on to become a perennial Pro Bowler and one of the great Falcons of all time.
One of the all-time
Even if
greats.
that caused some astronomical sadness.
When Hecker was fired 3 games into the 1968 season, he was so damn happy. He was finally free after a head coaching tenure that had resulted in 4 wins and 26 losses. This wasn't totally a referendum on Hecker's coaching ability. He'd later join the Niners coaching staff and win multiple Super Bowls there. It's just that brand new teams lose a lot. Regardless, though, no coach with this long a leash has ever done this much losing. When the 504 coaches who have ever coached in an NFL game are plotted by their wins and losses, Norb Hecker's 4-26 record is all by itself.
Wow.
The driver of those first few
Another
dark
record
seasons,
for the
as you might
Falcons.
expect, was poor quarterback play. The first QB in franchise history was Randy Johnson, who the Falcons bookended with Nobis to close out the 1966 NFL Draft's first round. He was arguably the worst quarterback each of his first 2 seasons, posting identical passer ratings of 47.8 in each. Then an injury-plagued third
not
season
exactly
in
Seattle's Randy
1968
Johnson.
opened the door for backup Bob Berry's first career extended playing time, and he also underwhelmed. But he was better than Johnson and was named the starter for the 1969 season. Berry and then Johnson would each get hurt and replace one another, but they played
I've never heard of
surprisingly
any of
well
these
when
names.
healthy. As a result, the Falcons, outscored by over 200 points in each of their previous 3 seasons, actually outscored their opposition in year 4. They sorta just treaded water over the next 3 years with Berry under center before trading him to Minnesota in a deal to acquire quarterback Bob Lee in 1973. Lee lost out on the starting gig to Dick Shiner to open the season, but after dropping 3 of their first 4 games, Lee replaced Shiner, and the Falcons immediately went on a lengthy winning streak. Lee's hold on the job would be short-lived. In 1974, he was benched multiple times for Pat Sullivan, but Sullivan struggled mightily as well and also got yanked late in the season. Enter their formerly third-string rookie out of Lehigh, Kim McQuilkin.
McQuilkin? Is that a real name?
This is where we talk about the Atlanta Falcons passing attack in the mid-70s, which was bad in ways that are impossible to imagine
This
today.
can't be good.
I mean, if you made current Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan throw into a 35-man defense, he'd probably still come up with better stats than what we're about to see.
Oh
At this early point in
no.
the story, I'd like to urge you to cherish this. Though it might seem like it now, this is not the story of a team that's perpetually hapless and awful. In the future, the Atlanta Falcons are going to do a whole lot of winning and a whole lot of contending. This is the one and only time we're going to go long on a Falcons team that deeply, genuinely sucks ass. There's a strange sort of beauty in that. Enjoy it while it lasts.
McQuilkin closed out a Week 12 loss to the Rams and threw 3 interceptions in the second half, bringing his career total to 4 on just 34 attempts. But Lee and Sullivan had been so disastrous all year that the Falcons figured they had nothing to lose and kept McQuilkin in the lineup for the final 2 games to see what he could do. First, the good news. They were in the midst of a 7-game losing streak when he took over, and they split his 2 starts. Now, the bad news. Another 5 of his passes were intercepted.
Oh
That
my
brought his rookie season
God.
to a close with his 79 passes generating just 373 yards, with 9 of them being picked off while still searching for his first career touchdown pass. Combined with miserable play out of Lee and Sullivan, who together threw 22 picks against 4 touchdowns, the 1974 Falcons passing offense was dreadful. Like, really dreadful. The NFL's 32 teams have combined to play 1,509 seasons since the AFL and
Here we go.
NFL merged in 1970. Here's the passing
feel so bad
proficiency
for our
of
older
each
fans.
and every one based on passer rating and adjusted net yards per attempt. Over 99% came in with a passer rating above 40, and most that didn't were at least close and at least had an adjusted net yards per attempt above 1.
Here it
And
comes.
then we have the 1974 Atlanta Falcons with a passer rating under 28 and a negative adjusted yards per attempt. Yeah, there's one squad, the 1977 Tampa Bay Buccaneers, that was even worse than they were. But as for the other 1,507, the 74 Falcons are complete outcasts from them. With their thorough inability to get anything going through the air, Atlanta had to turn to the draft to try and find some sort of answer at quarterback. And there was really only one strong option to pursue: the University of California's Steve Bartkowski. Sitting with the 3rd overall selection in the 1975 NFL Draft, and unable to afford missing out on the top prospect, to guarantee their ability to draft him, the Falcons had to ship one of the league's top offensive linemen, George Coons, along with the number 3 pick to the Colts to land the 1st overall pick. Seeking a new franchise quarterback after a season like Atlanta had in 1974 is understandable, as they were beyond atrocious through the air. But if they'd just been regular bad instead of that bad, they wouldn't have felt so much pressure to get a QB. Perhaps they could have instead kept their standout tackle, kept their 3rd overall pick, and taken, say, a dazzling running back prospect out of Jackson State by the name of Walter Payton. Anyway, midway through Bartkowski's rookie season, he dislocated his elbow, creating another chance for McQuilkin to play. Although he did throw his first career touchdown in relief against Cincy, it was overshadowed by 3 picks, and a listless first half the next week in New Orleans got him benched at halftime. With Bartkowski still shelved for another couple weeks and a trip to Minnesota on deck, McQuilkin was reinserted into the starting lineup. Entering that game, he'd thrown 13 career interceptions against just 1 touchdown, but we hadn't seen anything yet. Things may have been wobbly before, but here's where the wheels completely fall off. McQuilkin attempted 26 passes, completing 5 to each team for 43 yards with no touchdowns. Those 5 interceptions ensured him a passer rating on the day of 0.0. However, he was playing against the defending conference champion Vikings and their terrifying purple people eaters on defense. Like Hall of Fame defensive end Carl Eller makes quarterbacks' lives miserable enough as a pass rusher, it's really not fair for him to also snag the only pick of his career right here by throwing a big paw up there on this screen pass and coming down with it.
It's the
This was a
Falcons, of
really
course he
brutal
did.
game, so let's show some mercy and pretend that didn't happen. Okay, so he threw 4 picks. Oh, still 0. Maybe a receiver ran a bad route or deflected a well-thrown ball. That happens. Okay then, let's take a 2nd interception off the board. In a somber post-game scene, McQuilkin had no words.
Come on, man.
Even reporters were speechless.
Oh boy.
McQuilkin returned the next year, and a month into the 76 season, Bartkowski suffered a season-ending knee injury. More McQuilkin.
Oh, we needed that breather, didn't we?
That was fast.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, I will subscribe to YouTube Premium here soon.
He played a lot like the previous 2 years and was eventually yanked from the lineup in a season that marked the final extensive playing time of his career. By passer rating and adjusted net yards per attempt, McQuilkin's first 3 seasons likely constituted 3 of the 4 worst by any quarterback to throw at least 60 passes in a campaign since the merger. Despite his level of play, McQuilkin wasn't one of the worst players or even quarterbacks in NFL history. For one, he managed to hang around the NFL for 7 years before
Oh my God.
voluntarily retiring, when most
That's, like,
players
pretty
are
impressive.
lucky to have a career half that long. Additionally, as underscored by the pitiful 1974 Falcons passing game, whose ineptitude Bob Lee and Pat Sullivan were more responsible for than McQuilkin, he was embedded within a terrible offensive infrastructure in which all other men brave enough to try and play quarterback for the Falcons during the mid-70s also struggled immensely. His protection wasn't up to snuff, and he had zero coaching staff stability. What's ironic is that despite his noteworthy struggles during his time in the NFL, in the big picture, very few people have been as successful at as wide a variety of endeavors as Kim McQuilkin has. The man excelled in everything he tried his hand at after his playing days came to a close. First as a football analyst, then in becoming an executive with Cartoon Network, then in starting his own toy company that licensed merchandise for movies, then in presiding over a supply chain consulting business.
He just
And
needed to get
whereas
away from the
plenty of
Falcons.
Non-stars don't stand out in any way and have boring, forgettable careers, McQuilkin's career lent itself to the creation of some fascinating charts for a documentary made about his Falcons nearly 50 years after he played for them. God, I love Kim McQuilkin.
I do too. This is our official editorial position. Kim McQuilkin rules. Now, all this decidedly subpar quarterbacking cuts even deeper once we consider who was actually presiding over most of it. Between 68 and 74, their head coach was not that far removed from a Hall of Fame career as a quarterback. In fact, many at the time considered him to be the best quarterback ever. Even before being subjected to all this horrendous passing happening right in front of him, this man was already established as one of the crankiest individuals ever to walk the earth. A big old crusty Dutchman who'd cuss you out as soon as he looked at you. Take just a minute to imagine what such a man might look like. How'd you do?
Yep.
Across all sports, the 1970s were a golden age for crabby red-ass coaches, and Norm Van Brocklin might have been the best of the best. He smoked like a chimney on the sideline. Who's going to tell him no? This man was a former two-time NFL champion quarterback, spending most of his playing days in Los Angeles, a place he hated because hippies confounded him. In fact, Norm hated everything that was less than 9,000 years old. He hated it when quarterbacks scrambled.
It's fantastic.
When Lions kicker and
It's
Cyprus
majestic,
native Gary
is what it
Ukrainian
is.
used a newly introduced soccer-style kick to beat him, he wanted the government to take a hard line against the Cypriots. When the NFL merged with the AFL, his reason the situation was that the NFL was stupid, and also that the AFL was stupid. It couldn't have been easy for a guy who did so much winning as a player to do so much losing as a coach. His first stop was with the Minnesota Vikings, and seeing as they were a brand new franchise, Van Brocklin was able to draft players from other teams. There were a bunch of stiffs, he said, about the players he himself selected. After a few years of losing, he quit, then came back the next day and said he was a fighter, not a quitter, and then he lost some more and then he quit. Strangely, during his time in Atlanta, the press actually seemed to kind of like the guy, despite him calling them whores and sons of bitches, and one reported occasion grabbing them by the necktie. As an orator, he could stop on a dime and fly off the handle without warning. One of his post-game locker room speeches,
This guy's literally the opposite of Dan Quinn.
Immediately veered into a rant
Yes,
about how
he
the
is.
Atlanta media
He
apparatus was
literally
conspiring
threatened to
against him
fight
that
the
involved
Atlanta
multiple
media.
implications of the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890. He concluded with a declaration that sounded like something straight out of the Nixon White House tapes. Van Brocklin loved Richard Nixon. He also hated Richard Nixon. What's interesting, though, is that the media didn't simply write him off as an asshole. They described him as a complete enigma, a man they just could not figure out. I think they knew that he was always kind of
Of course
halfway
he did.
serious, that he realized he'd never escape criticism no matter what he did, so there was no harm in upping the volume. On the field, Van Brocklin sort of righted the ship and curbed the outright freefall of the early years. In 1971, he led the Falcons to their first winning season. 2 years later, they ripped off 7 straight wins and found themselves at 8-4, well within reach of the NFC's wildcard spot. Best of all, their schedule was finally getting to the easy part. Up next were the 3-win St. Louis Cardinals, who had been completely wrecked by injuries in recent weeks.
Oh,
The
here we
Falcons even had
go.
home field advantage. This shouldn't have even been a contest, and it wasn't. The stage was set for what, to this very day, is easily one of the most agonizing, hideous NFL games ever played. You heard Alex mention passer rating. This is a metric that takes into account a quarterback's passing yards, completion percentage, touchdowns scored, and interceptions thrown. Mathematically, the best passer rating possible is 158.3, but few quarterbacks have ever managed that. In 2020, the average passer rating was about 93. The passing game has evolved dramatically over the last 50 years, as you
And
can
the
see.
Falcons have
Back
so
in
many of those to
1973,
choose
the
from.
league average was about 65. Now, this metric has kind of a sick sense of humor. Imagine if on every play the quarterback took the ball, turned sideways, and threw it to a hot dog vendor in the
I swear to God, if it's 28.3, I'm going to
no
scream.
completions, no touchdowns, no interceptions. Because of
No
the way the math is
scores.
structured, his passer rating would sit at 39.6. So going lower than that is pretty humiliating. You get there by throwing interceptions. And if you're apocalyptically bad, it's mathematically feasible for you to get to absolute zero, the lowest possible rating. Since 1950, there have only been 91 instances of a passer throwing at least 10 passes and still finishing with a flat zero. Even back then, this only happened a couple times a year across the entire NFL. On this day against the Falcons in 1973, Cardinals quarterback Gary Keithley suffered this indignity. So did Bob Lee, the Falcons quarterback. Both starting quarterbacks finished with a passer rating of 0.0 in the same game. To
My
this day,
God.
this is the only time this has ever happened. A game would have to be played in a hurricane for this to ever happen again. There's no explanation for it. There's no explanation for Pat Sullivan, the Falcons backup who replaced Lee, running up the gut and just dropping the ball with nobody in his service system. There's no explanation for star linebacker Greg Brazina doing the same, recovering a fumble only to fumble it himself and watch the Cardinals take it in for 6 points. It was the most thorough mockery of the quarterback
Just
position
incredible.
ever seen in the NFL.
They die
And Norm
again.
Van Brocklin, once the greatest quarterback in America,
The
had to
birth
watch it all
of falconing.
couldn't even muster any anger after the game. There was no big
Ladies
blow-up,
and gentlemen.
no long diatribe about the Teapot Dome scandal or whatever. He just seemed sad.
Oh my gosh.
The loss ultimately torpedoed their playoff chances, and it precipitated another free fall that lasted several years. Van Brocklin saved his greatest performance for the very end, after a 42-7 hammering at the hands of the Miami Dolphins in 1974 that dropped the Falcons to 2-6. Today's coaches throw fits. Yeah, they'll yell at reporters or try to make them look stupid, but none of them are Norm Van Brocklin, who stood at the podium that day and basically said, "Fuck it, I will fight you all," challenging every reporter in the room to a
course
fist
they
fight,
did.
right then and there, straight up. No one took him up on it. I think everyone knew that he 100% meant it. He was fired the next day, and he never coached in the NFL again.
Shocking.
Who wanted him fired for years, Norm Van Brocklin's inability to get to the playoffs eclipsed the fact that he'd built the Falcons into a team that could actually win a few games. When he passed away 9 years later, some of those
Hopefully
in the
wish
media
a reporter
continued
would
to
have fought
insist
him.
that there was more to this man than most understood. Most didn't see the quintessential family man who melted
He
down
also
whenever he
told
was
them
around
that to
children,
go ahead and
or
stack the
insisted on
furniture
visiting a
so
sick
that
young
they don't
Falcons
fight.
fan every
Like,
day after
he was
practice.
a
That
feisty
isn't how
fellow.
Norm Van Brocklin went down in history. He didn't seem to care whether or not we saw that side of him. Nobody's ever any one person.
Some people are.
Through the first 6 years of play for the Atlanta Falcons, they never had a running back reach 1,000 rushing yards. The closest anyone had come was when Junior Coffey rushed for 722 yards in each of the franchise's first 2 seasons. Then before 1972, the
I
team
actually
traded
really
for Packers
appreciated
running
learning
back
that
Dave
about
Hampton.
Van Brocklin.
That's-
Just the fact that he did have a softer side and wasn't just like that brash guy who was
In
threatening
Hampton's
to fight
first
the
year in
Atlanta
Atlanta,
media.
he'd rushed for 930 yards
know,
heading into the
it just-
final week of the
that's
season,
one of the
in
things I
strong
really like
position to
about
crack the
this
1,000-yard
episode is
milestone.
I've learned a lot.
While not near
about the
Jim
team.
Brown's then record of
There's a
over
lot I did
18
not know about
yards,
this franchise.
That 1,000-yard barrier's historically been a big badge of
And we're
honor for
only
running
to
backs.
1972.
At halftime of that game, he was named the Falcons' most valuable player and was presented with a giant trophy. Later in the fourth quarter, he indeed hit that 1,000-yard mark, and the game stopped so
Oh my
Hampton could
God, I
be given a
remember this.
game ball and the home crowd
I
could
actually know
voice
about
their
this.
appreciation. Then, this happened. 6-yard loss. Took him down to 994
This
yards.
is incredible, by the
Hampton
way.
would get only one more carry for one more yard, finishing the season with 995. Just like that, poof, that magical 1,000-yard season had vanished into thin air. Hampton was crushed. He really, really wanted that comma in his rushing total, and to actually get it and then
This
lose
whole
it
story is
was
so
an
Falcons.
extremely bitter pill to swallow. But hey, there's always next year, right?
Oh no.
And what do you know?
Yeah.
Hampton was
Yeah.
once
Yeah.
again in striking distance of 1,000, entering the Falcons' last game in 1973. It appeared his best efforts would again fall just short as he was stuck on 982 when they missed a field goal with under 2 minutes remaining. A subsequent interception, however, gave new life for Hampton to accomplish his goal that was so cruelly ripped from his grasp a year earlier.
These
Steve
graphics are
Hampton
killing
is
me.
Atlanta's only objective.
I know.
And he picked up 10 yards
They're
across his
so
next
well
2
done,
carries,
but
pulling within
what
8
they're
yards of 1,000
visually
with
representing
still
is
enough time
deeply
for
upsetting
4
to me.
more carries.
Yes.
Most of the
Those
time.
4 carries produced 5 yards.
Look at this.
It's so brutal.
Dave
It's
Hampton
so
has
brutal.
followed up his 1,000-turn 995-yard season with a 997-yard season. Once again, he was torn up about it. Once more, there's always next year, though, right?
Oh God.
Actually, the next year, his 1974 season was
incredible.
derailed by injury, but hey, there's always the year after next, right?
Not again.
This was a burning desire with a flame that never faded. Hampton returned for training camp in 1975, a man on a mission for his 1,000 yards. He again had 900-something yards heading into the finale, a trip to his old stomping grounds in
It's like I'm
northeast
watching
Wisconsin.
Moby Dick.
Winning was always the top priority for Hampton, who certainly didn't want to reach the milestone in lieu of team success. But that still wasn't going to stop him.
The
There
Moby
was
Dick franchise of the NFL.
After all the twists and turns that football gods bestowed upon him over the last 3 years, that he was going to be denied here. Unfortunately for Hampton, his Falcons trailed by multiple scores for most of the second half, necessitating an air-based attack to try and get back in the game. But the story changed a bit when the Packers iced things late. So in the waning minutes of a freezing game that was out of reach, with Hampton at 972 yards on the season, the Falcons shifted into Operation Fulfill Hampton's Dream. An explosive 22-yard burst had him knocking on the door, and after breaking through on his next carry to reach 1,000 for the second time in his career, he called it a season.
This is hard to
staying
watch.
above 1,000 for the first time in his career.
That makes me want to cry.
I know.
Dave Hampton played one more injury-plagued season after that, and then he
Oh my
retired.
God.
He got it in right under the bell. Sure, a 1,000-yard season pales in comparison to some of the numbers other running backs were putting up at the time, but the Falcons just aren't there right now. They can't even come close to contending with the NFL's elite, the Steelers and Cowboys and whatnot. What these guys need is a companion. Now, there are some of you watching right now who are delighting in all of this. Every Falcons defeat, every fumble, every meltdown on and off the field, you're loving every second of it, aren't you? Don't worry.
You guys,
Didn't
I
forget
was
about
so
you.
happy when I got to the resolution of that story.
Now the Atlanta Falcons
Finally.
and the New Orleans Saints.
Yes.
The NFL's Beavis and Butthead.
And I love that he was
You'd have
smart
to
enough
venture
to
into
get
the
off
white-hot
the field
rage dimension of
afterwards.
college
Like, don't
sports to
risk
find a
losing
rivalry
a
this
few
intense.
yards and letting
In
it
professional
flip
Right.
sports, there's
again.
no rivalry like this
Exactly.
anywhere in America. Forget rivalries like Lakers-Celtics or Yankees-Red Sox that you're told you care about. There have been a few that burned with the heat of 1,000 suns, like Bulls-Pistons or Habs-Nordiques, but this is the only one that's been able to sustain
is-
that degree
Here
of
we
hatred
go.
for half a century.
This is
Of all
like
the
the
possible
most
matchups
heated
in the
rivalry
NFL,
in
only
sports.
31 have been played at least 100 times, and Falcons-Saints is one of them. In almost all of these prolonged rivalries, one or both teams have won more games than they've lost throughout history. Up here, you've got two big historical winners, the Packers and Bears, who'd been duking it out for a century to various degrees of intensity. Down here, you've got Packers-Lions and Patriots-Jets, two pairings that are very much a big brother beating up on the little brother. Closer to the middle, you'll see a lot of the same AFC West teams that have been bottled up in the same tiny division, scrapping like rats in an outhouse for decades. These are teams that are traditionally competitive to one degree or another. And this is what makes Saints-Falcons so special. Two teams that have lost way more than they've won, meeting a couple times a year to beat on each other, because they couldn't beat on anybody else.
As a Falcons fan, there's no such thing as respecting the Saints in any shape or form. It's something
Exactly.
I was taught from the very beginning of entering this sad fandom. At first, I didn't even really know why I was supposed to hate the Saints. It was just something that my uncles and older brother told me to do if I wanted to be a true fan. In so many words, I was told, in this household, we don't mess with the Saints. Period. So that was that. With every matchup, I would watch the rage build up inside of them, as they shouted at the TV with a little more extra flair than usual because it was Aints Week. I was hooked from there. What makes this matchup so special is the pure pettiness from both fan bases. Of course, we hate each other, but it's hard to find more entertaining shit talking that you can find between the people of Atlanta and New Orleans. It's roasting at its finest. The Falcons could legitimately go 2-14 on the season, but as long as those 2 wins come against the Saints, Falcons fans would still be insufferable.
Sports rivalries
That's so
often
true.
take decades to form.
It is true.
This one
Yeah.
sprung up almost immediately. It's week 11 in the 1967 season, the Saints' first season and the Falcons' second. Both teams are terrible. This is the first time they ever meet in the regular season, and for
Joe
most of
Ali,
the
who's talking
afternoon,
right
it looks
now,
like
is one of my
Atlanta's finally
colleagues,
going to
and
pick up an easy
we,
win.
of course,
After
got
all,
along
they
right
were
away
cruising
because
early, having
he is
jumped
a
out
real
to a
Falcons fan.
21-3
I
lead
do
in the
appreciate
second
getting
quarter.
his perspective
Slowly
on
but
it.
surely, the Saints score 17 unanswered points to pull within 1 in the fourth quarter.
Of course they do.
Falcons respond by kicking a field goal to go up 4 with under 4 minutes left. New Orleans gets one final chance to complete their unlikely comeback from down 18, but the Falcons are in good shape. They just got to defend their end zone against the opposing backup quarterback. Even as the Saints march their way down into the red zone, it's not long before they're staring down the barrel of a 4th and 14 with the game on the line. Quarterback Billy Kilmer's first read is wideout Flea Roberts in the flat, but he
Flea
quickly looks
Roberts.
the other way before firing a pass downfield into the end zone that gets picked off. Game over. Except there's a reason he didn't throw to the flat. Falcons DB Jerry Richardson had apparently committed pass interference against Roberts, even if he disputes the timing of the alleged infraction. The Saints, with new life, go on to score the game-winning touchdown, then defensively hang on by a thread to win the first chapter of this storied rivalry.
This was the first of 103 body blows and counting that the Falcons and Saints will deal each other. It was excruciating for Falcons fans to see their team build a 21-3 lead, only to lose in the end. See, you gotta get to 28. Make it 28-3 and you're golden. Those of you who have read ahead know that both these teams would go on to do a good amount of winning at some point or another, but this era was all about 2 bad teams learning how to hate each other. After losing their first encounter, the Falcons ripped off 9 wins in a row against the Saints. Many of these were routs, but one in particular was a clobbering that made history. This is every instance in the post-merger era in which a team lost on their home field by at least 35 points. Typically only see this happen once or twice a year in the NFL. You never see this, a 55-point loss in front of your home fans. Approximately half the population of Metro Atlanta scored a touchdown in this one. After Saints quarterback Archie Manning was knocked out, backup Bob Davis came in and managed to pass a rating of 1.7. Let's jump back
I'm
over
enjoying
here
this
just a
one.
bit. We've already established that a passer
Yes.
rating of 0 is abysmal, but to approach it as closely as 1.7 without actually reaching it, you have to do something really gnarly, and that's what Davis did. His total passing yardage at the end of the day was -5. Davis is one of only 3 to attempt at least 10 passes and still
is my favorite
somehow
part,
finish below
by the
0
way.
yards. The Falcons were running out of ways to humiliate the Saints that day. Those of you who have older siblings will surely see him in Ken Burrow, who, after hauling in touchdown number 6,000, taunts everyone in the building who's bothered to stick around this long. You gonna spike it? Nope. You gonna spike it again? Nope. Y'all ain't worth it. I mean, it's a tale as old as time. The Falcons themselves suffered plenty of bulldozings in this era, most notably a 59-0 loss to the Rams that ranks among the worst the NFL's ever seen. As youngsters, the Falcons were having a lot of trouble at school. This is why they needed the Saints. Go out there, get shoved around, come back home to the South, pick a fight with their sibling. That's how they dealt with it. But although it didn't seem like it, the Falcons in the mid-1970s were right on the precipice of 2 things. First, they were about to invent new and more devastating ways to beat the Saints. And second, they were about to enter an era that most fans today have completely forgotten. These Atlanta Falcons didn't want to make the decades-long slog toward respectability that most new teams settle for. They wanted to win a Super Bowl. Now.
All right. There we go, folks. And that is episode 1 of the history of the Atlanta Falcons. Gina, you've seen it now twice. What are your thoughts?
Yes. I really enjoyed it, and I think the thing that I liked the most about it is that I actually learned a lot about the team and the history of the team and football in this region than I really expected to. But I'm excited to hear from you and Adnan since it was the first time that you've seen it.
Adnan, what do you think, man?
I knew what I had an idea coming into it because I watched the Seattle Mariners one from last year, and I think that one was a really, really good one. I don't really care about the Mariners at all, and even I had chills watching some of those moments. So it's definitely something that even if I wasn't a fan, and this has my interest from the beginning, I'd probably still be interested in watching the rest of it. But yeah, definitely there was some stuff that I didn't know about. Like I didn't know about the Heisman part in 1917 about like him developing the forward pass in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech. That's really cool. But yeah, it's I definitely can't wait to see and to hear their perspective on the 90s, on the Super Bowl, the Morton Anderson kick in '98.
Oh, yeah.
And on the Michael Vick era. So it'll definitely be fun watching.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. This predated my fandom. I didn't start until 1980, so this history has been quite informative. And we do have a couple of people in the chat, including Brian. I'm going to call you out here, who's been watching since the 60s, which is incredibly... I feel like we should apologize to you.
Yes.
and also acknowledge the incredible fandom you've shown by following this franchise for so long and sticking with it. I mentioned earlier, and Gina and Adnan, I think you can relate to this. The Falcons fans have a shared trauma that unites us. And I think that is part of why we had to get together to watch this episode, to sort of share in the misery. But at the same time, like there's some good stuff coming up. The 1980 season was incredible until the end. That first Super Bowl appearance was amazing. Until the end. Michael Vick was electrifying, one of the most exciting players in NFL history. And
Absolutely.
We're still in the midst of one of the best runs in Falcons history with a quarterback like Matt Ryan. I'm really looking forward to the rest of the series, and I hope that everyone who is tuned in with us to watch this will come and visit again. And we may be able to watch the next episode or some future ones as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Gina, any final thoughts? I don't want to drag this on endlessly, but any final thoughts on this series?
I just want to share a fun fact about Kim McQuilkin, who I know that tonight was a lot of people's introduction to a really terrible quarterback, but a pretty cool guy.
And this is a very pro Ken McQuilkin show, by the way.
It is. That is our official editorial perspective. He rules. They literally said that in the episode. But so Kim McQuilkin is married to also a woman named Kim. And much like my husband, Christopher, Kim has been a Patriots fan for a long time. They made a bet on Super Bowl 51. And if the Falcons won, she had to wear a Julio Jones jersey for a week. And if the Falcons lost, he had to wear a Julian Edelman jersey for a week. Can you imagine how he must have felt at the end of that game? Like, I feel bad for us. I remember how sad that game was for us.
Oh, yeah.
But I didn't have to wear a Julian Edelman jersey after. So I just want to say, Kim McQuilkin, you're one of us, and we support you.
I also love how Kim McQuilkin is still a Falcons fan to this day.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah.
But definitely what DW was saying, I think it kind of has some parallels with that Mariners documentary, and is sort of probably why John chose the Falcons to do this documentary on. Because I mean, the Mariners also a pretty shitty franchise overall in regards to wins and losses in their history, but you still had those electrifying moments, those electrifying stars, Ken Griffey Jr., Ichiro, Randy Johnson, and then you kind of see the parallels with the Falcons with Dion, Julio, Vic, Matt Ryan. So, the common denominator, of course, is that both franchises are still looking for that first title, but it's definitely a cool thing to watch some of these documentaries on these sports teams that really aren't as glorified and as celebrated as the title winning Packers of like yesteryear, or like the Patriots of like modern days. So it's a cool thing to see some of these sort of smaller, not as successful franchises getting that bit of shine.
Yeah. I'll close this out with this, and I want to say to all the people who joined this stream, thank you for joining us. We didn't know how this would go, but often I think just commiserating with other Falcons fans shows to be quite therapeutic. And I'll say this, I've had people ask me why I'm a Falcons fan. I was actually born in Texas. My mom is still a Dallas Cowboys fan to this day. They obviously have multiple championships to celebrate in their franchise history. But as I think about it, and I think about where this series is going, there's something about the franchise that stands for continuing to get back up day after day. You're not the 49ers or the Steelers. You're not that storied franchise. You're the one that keeps showing up. Even though you get beat on, you get beat down, life kicks you in the teeth. As a Falcons fan, you keep showing up. And even in the most brutal of losses, which no one knows that better than a Falcons fan, we still show up. If there's one thing that is true about being a Falcons fan, it's this: you can't keep us down. You think your 28-3 joke gets to us now? You think referencing the Super Bowl harms us? Falcons fans are made of steel. We are tough as nails, and we show up year after year. We may not win a lot of games. We may not make the playoffs, and we may not be in Super Bowl contention. But like the average person in this country that doesn't have every advantage in the world, we keep showing up. And I think that speaks for a lot.
And I just want to say, nobody will appreciate that championship more than we will.
Exactly.
When it finally happens, dear God, I hope it happens.
And I hope that the one thing that everybody takes away from this game is that 62-7 win over the Saints. Like, that be the thing that you focus on, because it really was a thing of beauty in New Orleans.
100%.
And I do want to also give a shout out to the people who stuck with us watching. And I mean, these are the biggest loyalists of the show. These are the guys that are tuning in.
Yep.
In early June, late May, when it's pure dead zone. And we're just shooting shit about just like randomly anything on this show every Wednesday. So
yep.
Twizzlers and whatnot.
Exactly. And to Adnan's point, we deeply, deeply appreciate all of you, whether you support us at the site, here at the Falcoholic Live, or on the podcast. Just know we couldn't do this without you, and we're in this with you. Unlike some of the national outlets, we're legitimately fans of this broken franchise.
That has enough sad moments in its history that they can make a 7-part documentary.
Even the Mariners only got 6.
We get one more just for the extra amount of pain we've gone through.
Yeah, and the Mariners
for fun.
The Mariners have been around since like the 30s too.
Yeah, and that just shows you.
But yeah, definitely check out thefalcoholic.com if you haven't already. I have no idea how you would make it to this video without knowing thefalcoholic.com.
Just
But
gotta cover the bases.
yeah, if that's somehow possible, like two quarterbacks having a 0 passer rating in the same game, then check out thefalcoholic.com. Check out the Falcoholic podcast, which DW hosts and which Gina is a frequent guest on. And
Co-host.
yeah, co-host.
Co-host during the season, please get my title correct.
We are very, very we give a lot of emphasis to titles on this show. I think Gina has like 10 of them that I'm forgetting now.
I do, and that's fine.
And of course, the Falcoholic Live. We have shows every Wednesday at 8:10 p.m. We'll have one tomorrow. Kevin Knight just barely escaped the grasp of Dave's coach tonight, and somehow
Indeed.
he managed to find freedom for a night. But he'll be back tomorrow night to and moving forward to lead the show. So
You got it.
yep. Dave will readjust the locks and in the boiler room.
Well said, Andan. Guys, thanks for joining us for this first episode. We're going to sign off for the night. As Adnan said, check us out at falcoholic.com. Moscow Mule is talking now. Thefalcoholic.com, the Falcoholic podcast, and Kevin Knight will be back in his normal hosting duties for the Falcoholic Live. Thanks to all of you who tuned in. We appreciate you deeply. Hang in there. This is going to be a fun season, and stay tuned. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.